When we think of the veil today, our minds probably jump to some very specific, very modern images and debates. But what if I told you the story of this single piece of cloth is way older and way more complicated than you might think? We're about to peel back the layers on a 4,000-year journey that, believe it or not, doesn't start with religion at all. It starts with law, class, and status.
So that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? What was the veil's original purpose? The answer is, well, it's probably not what you're thinking. And that's because it takes us way, way back to a time before the major religions we know today were even a thing.
And just look at this timeline. The sheer scale of this history is kind of mind-blowing. We're kicking things off in the 15th century BCE. To put that in perspective, that's almost 3,500 years ago. From there, we'll trace how this one symbol moves through ancient laws, into early Jewish texts, then early Christian letters, and finally the Quran. It's a story of some pretty incredible change.
All right, let's do this. Let's travel way back in time to ancient Mesopotamia. This is where we find the very first written laws about veiling, in the Middle Assyrian Empire. And here's the kicker. They have absolutely nothing to do with piety or modesty, at least not in the way we might think of it now.
So, here's the bottom line. Under Assyrian law, the veil was basically a tool for social engineering. Its whole job was to make a woman's social status instantly obvious to anyone who saw her on the street. It was all about drawing a clear line, separating women into two boxes, respectable and not.
And this is where it gets really intense. It shows you just how strict that dividing line was. If you were a free woman, you had to wear a veil in public. It was a sign of honor. But if you were a slave or a prostitute, it was completely forbidden, no exceptions. And if you got caught wearing one, the punishment was just brutal, lashing and having hot tar poured on your head. This makes one thing crystal clear. The veil wasn't just some piece of clothing. It was a legally protected privilege.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. We're going to see how this ancient custom gets carried forward and then totally redefined. See, the idea of the veil as a status symbol didn't just vanish when the Assyrian Empire did. Nope. It wove its way right into the cultural fabric of the whole Near East. And sure enough, in early Jewish texts, we see this exact same theme playing out again and again. For instance, when Rebecca first meets her high-status future husband, Isaac, what does she do? She veils herself. Then you have the story of Tamar, who uses a veil as a disguise, and she's mistaken for a prostitute. It just goes to show how complex the signals were. And then the prophet Isaiah gives us this really powerful image. He talks about noble women being unveiled as a symbol for their complete humiliation, their fall from grace into slavery. So yeah, that connection between the veil and your place in society, still incredibly strong.
So for literally thousands of years, the story of the veil is all about one thing: social class. But then, around the 1st century CE, something changes. We get this massive twist in the story. For the first time ever, the meaning of the veil is about to be tied to theology.
And this is that pivot point. It's a game changer. In his letter to the early Christian community in Corinth, the Apostle Paul gives the veil a totally new layer of meaning. He says a woman should cover her head, not just because of her social status, but as a symbol of a divine hierarchy. Where man is the head of woman and God is the head of man. This is a huge, radical shift, from a social marker to a theological one.
Okay, let's jump in our time machine again. We're going forward another 600 years, landing in the city of Medina in the 7th century. Now, to really get the verses about veiling in the Quran, we have to understand what was actually happening on the ground, the specific social issues the early Muslim community was dealing with right then and there.
So, try to picture it. 7th century Medina. The streets could be pretty dangerous, especially at night. There was a very clear social divide between free women and slave women. And we know from historical commentators that women were being harassed. The excuse the harassers often used? They'd claim they thought the women were slaves, who just didn't have the same kinds of social protection.
So along comes this Quranic verse, Azab 59. And classical commentators explain it as a really direct, really practical solution to that problem. The instruction was for women to wear a jilbab, which is an outer garment, and the reason was super specific. So they would be recognized as free women, and as a result, not be harassed. It was all about using a marker of identity to create safety.
And this is so important to understand. This wasn't about inventing a brand new practice of veiling from scratch. Not at all. It was about taking a symbol that was already there,
something their culture already understood, an outer garment that meant status, and giving it a new job, a new urgent purpose, protection and recognition.
So, after this wild 4,000-year journey, what have we learned about symbols? Well, it tells us that a piece of cloth is never just a piece of cloth, right? Its meaning isn't inherent. It's given to it by the people who wear it and by the societies that see it.
I mean, when you look back, the transformation is just stunning. Think about it. It started as a legal tool to lock in social classes in ancient Assyria. Then it became a cultural sign of being respectable in early Judaism. Then it got a whole new theological meaning in early Christianity. And then it was adapted into a practical way to get recognized and stay safe in early Islam. Wow.
What this whole history shows us, loud and clear, is that the meaning of a symbol is never set in stone. It's fluid. People argue about it. It's always changing. And that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. As our own societies keep changing, who gets to decide what the veil, or really any powerful symbol, is going to mean next?